Hi everyone, welcome to video number 2 on the circulatory system. We're going to focus on disorders first in this video. Anemia, being the first disorder to be discussed, is a result of too few red blood cells, which lowers the amount of oxygen that can be carried by the blood. The two images here show this picture on the right is the picture that shows normal blood smears, and this is a picture on the left is a smear of someone who has anemia. You can see that the density or the number of red blood cells that are packed into the space is lower in the picture of an anemic individual. Now, there's a need to increase iron in the diet of someone who has anemia because the iron is used to make the protein hemoglobin. Hemoglobin has iron in it, and that is responsible for carrying the oxygen and or carbon dioxide by the red blood cells. Now, typically, you would see anemia more frequently in females typically than males. A result of this can be pregnancy, it can be the reproductive cycle and loss of blood due to menstruation, but the smaller stature of women also plays a factor in the amount of blood that they have in their body to start with. The second disorder identified here is sickle cell anemia. Now, sickle cell anemia is a genetic condition. We call these hereditary conditions. It's caused by an abnormal form of hemoglobin, and there is a supplemental video here by Howard Hughes Medical Institute discussing and explaining sickle cell anemia in greater detail. But this particular image shows the physical structural difference between a normal red blood cell and a sickle cell. Those sickle cells tend to get caught up and jammed up in the capillaries, the smallest blood vessels of the circulatory system, which can be very painful. Sickle cell anemia isn't an all or nothing thing. All right, you can carry one gene for the sickle cell anemia trait, and only some of your cells will be sickle-shaped. This is a situation in genetics that we call variable penetrance. This idea that some individuals will have more sickle cells than others, it's not an all or nothing thing. So there are some normal red blood cells and some sickle cells that exist in the bloodstream, and that varies by person. Some people are just more significantly affected by having more of them. The third disorder identified on here is a cancer disorder. Now, leukemia is frequently referred to as blood cancer, right? It's abnormally high levels of certain white blood cells. Now, in our blood slides, we will see these large purple cells. You can even see them up here. These are white blood cells. If there are a lot of these white blood cells, they have a tendency to crowd out the red blood cells. And these white blood cells are also not functioning properly. So this is a cancer, and cancers by definition are abnormal cell division, where cells normally have a trigger that tells them when to divide and when not to divide. In cancer, the cell cycle of division is unregulated, and so the cells divide abnormally quickly. And so a person who has leukemia has abnormal numbers of white blood cells being produced in their bone marrow, because red blood cells and many white blood cells are created in the bone marrow, and if there is a cancer in the bone marrow, you can get abnormal division of these white blood cells that can lead to significant problems. Now, often the treatment might include a bone marrow transplant where they remove the cancerous cells and put in marrow that is non-cancerous. That's just one method of potentially treating leukemia. But cancer is a major contributor to deaths in the United States and worldwide. So it's important to have an understanding of it. Hemophilia is the fourth in our list. Hemophilia is another genetic trait. It is hereditary, and it is a result of having not produced enough platelets, or it could be because you're not producing clotting factors. But interesting to note that hemophilia, which means that your any damage to blood vessels can potentially not clot, and you can bleed out a significant amount of volume of blood that can be fatal in some cases. It's interesting to note that this particular genetic condition was pretty widespread in the royal families in the early 1900s, late 1800s, in the Russian royal families, and in Spanish monarchy. Why is that important? Well, not that any of us are royalty, however, but you're probably familiar with the notion that princesses and princes are supposed to marry royalty, and when there aren't a whole lot of royal families to marry into or with, there tended to be in the Russian, Spanish, and even into the English royalty a lot of inbreeding, and individuals were marrying relatives, cousins, second cousins, and so on and so forth, which increased the risk of this particular gene popping up more frequently. And so it's well documented in their family trees the number of times that hemophilia existed. We'll talk about that more when we get into genetics, but I'm also going to talk about, lastly, is allergies. Now, allergies, these are an abnormal response to an environmental antigen. Environmental antigens can include things like pollen, dust, peanuts, latex, bee stings. There are lots of people who are allergic to shellfish. And the reason that allergies are a problem is because it's an abnormal response. It's almost like there's an antigen or foreign protein that's present and it overreacts. And the overreaction is a result of white blood cells releasing histamines. And histamines cause capillaries to become pretty leaky. And so plasma and white blood cells start to leak into the surrounding tissue, causing inflammation. Right? So inflammation is the result that when you get a mosquito bite or a bee sting, that area of localized inflammation, meaning in that one region, gets raised and puffy. Right? That's a histamine response as a result of the foreign protein from the sting. However, some individuals have such a dramatic histamine response that it can cause body systems to become impaired. Like in the case of anaphylactic shock or anaphylaxis, people who have severe peanut allergies or severe shellfish allergies, even bee stings, right? They come in contact with just a small amount of that antigen, and their whole body responds in an overwhelming fashion. And in some of these cases, the bronchial tubes become swollen up and constrict, that makes it very difficult to breathe. This is like a asthma attack or something like that. Okay, so like a person who has asthma, in the case of asthma, that is often a result of exercise-induced overreaction. right? So asthma can be caused by exercise. Asthma can be caused by allergens as well. All right, so there are several reasons why this could happen, but we're specifically talking about the response to a foreign antigen that can cause a response by the white blood cells and the blood vessels to cause swelling and inflammation. Okay, so now let's talk about the immune system in a little more detail. You've got pathogens, which we covered. These are foreign organisms, viruses, bacteria, fungi that can cause a response. Antigens are the proteins that are found on those pathogens that we respond to. Our first line of defense is our skin. Now, the skin is a physical barrier, but anytime that barrier is compromised, either from injury, like if your skin gets dry and splits or cracks, bacteria, viruses can invade and get through that first line of defense. However, you also have to recognize that there are natural mucus membranes that are also vulnerable because our skin doesn't cover every single space. You have moist membranes that viruses and bacteria can get into. These include the places where you typically find infection: eyes, ears, nose or in your sinuses, and your throat. Right? Those are all moist membranes. And in addition, you also have to consider the reproductive structures where you have the urethra or the vaginal canal. You also have the rectum, which is the end of the digestive tract. The second line of defense is the release of these histamines to recruit white blood cells to the area. So histamines are going to open up those blood vessels and bring white blood cells to the area. The third line of defense is those white blood cells create a set of antibodies to defend your body from those foreign antigens. Lymphocytes are those white blood cells. Now, there are several different types of white blood cells, but generally the term lymphocyte is a good term to know to reference white blood cells. There are B cells, which are made in the bone. They produce antibodies. And then there are T cells, which mature in the thymus. These help to recognize foreign antigens. They also go around and engulf and kill certain cells or certain antigens. Vaccines, which we've discussed a little bit earlier in our school year, are injections of dead or weakened pathogens. But don't forget, our current COVID vaccination is a result of mRNA being used to produce that vaccine. Active immunity is a result of your body producing antibodies. You actively are defending yourself. You mount the defense. You defend your body. If you get chickenpox or receive a chickenpox vaccine, your body creates the defense, the antibodies against the antigens. However, passive immunity can also be helpful. If a person is exposed to an antigen, they can get antibody therapy. So they can be given antibodies to temporarily increase their body's defense. Another way you can get passive immunity is through breast milk from mom to baby. When the mom's immune system is fully developed, it produces antibodies that are also located in the milk, and as the baby consumes those antibodies enter the baby's body and help to defend that baby because it hasn't fully developed an immune system yet. And then you have HIV. Now, HIV is the virus that attacks specific T cells in the immune system. And because it's attacking those, it's preventing those cells from going around and defending your body. So without treating HIV, individuals can have more and more of those T cells defeated or immobilized, and then they develop a syndrome called acquired immune deficiency syndrome, or AIDS. AIDS is a result of HIV infection that is untreated. And this is an acquired immune deficiency. Because those T cells don't do their job, your immune system doesn't do its job well. And you're more likely to become very ill or possibly die from the minor infections that your body might normally be able to fight off. So some sort of bacterial infection or pneumonia, or sometimes it's hepatitis. There are lots of different conditions or infections that can cause an individual who has HIV to unfortunately die because of an infection that would normally be treatable. Okay, the last thing for this video is blood typing. Blood typing depends on the type of protein or antigen that you produce on your red blood cells. They come in A variety, a B variety, a combo pack, which is the A and B together. Both proteins are made. And then there's the neither A or B, and that's type O blood. Now, each individual's body produces a defense system against the opposite or the unknown. So a person who's type A makes the A protein, they make anti-B antibodies. So if a B protein enters their body, it will attack it and kill it. This is why transfusions in World War II were sometimes fatal, because they didn't know about A and B and O blood types. So if they transfuse blood from a B person into A, the blood would coagulate or clot up and the person would die. Their bodies are defending against the opposite protein. Remember, foreign proteins are offensive to your body. So you're going to have a defense system to prevent them from getting in. So a B person's blood will have A antibodies. All right, there'll be anti-A antibodies in their bloodstream. A person who's AB blood, though, they can't have either one of those or they'd attack themselves. So they don't produce the antibodies for anti-A or anti-B. And a person who's type O, because they expect neither of those proteins to be there, they will have both anti-A and they will have anti-B antibodies. What does this tell us about transfusions and sharing of blood? All right, type A. A person who's type A will reject type B blood and attack it because it produces anti-B antibodies. A person who is type B cannot have type A blood, and it cannot have type AB blood because there is an existing foreign protein in both of those, and it will attack because it produces anti-A antibodies. A person who's type AB blood can actually have any type of blood transfused. You can put A in, you can put B in, you can put O in, or you can put AB in, because there are no antibodies made that would cause it to reject a foreign protein. Now, the exact opposite is true for type O people. They produce anti-A and anti-B, and as a result, you can't give them any other type of blood but O. The great thing about being type O, though, they're known as the universal donor, because a person who's type O can give their blood to any of the other types and it will not have an offensive protein. The A protein is not there, the B protein is not there, and so you can give that blood to anybody and a foreign protein won't be identified. Now, when we start talking about positives and negatives, O positive, A positive, AB negative. That's a separate gene. The negative or positive is a separate gene, and a person who is positive for that gene produces another protein, all right, and that factor can cause a reaction in someone who is a negative. So you don't want to give positive to a person who is negative because their body will recognize that foreign factor and it will cause a response. We'll talk about that more when we get into human reproduction because that's when it can actually become significant with babies who are a different blood type than their mom. So we mentioned an AB person is a universal recipient, an O person is a universal donor, and when it comes to transplants, rejection will occur if the person produces antibodies in response to the antigens. Remember, everybody's protein is unique to them. So if I have a kidney transplant, that kidney is from someone else, it's foreign protein to me, I will reject it. My white blood cells will recognize it, identify it, and mount an immune response, and it will reject that organ. So organ rejection can be controlled by suppressing the immune system using immune suppression drugs. And unfortunately, the side effect of that is that person then becomes more susceptible to becoming infected with other different pathogens. So it's a double-edged sword. It saves you from rejecting the organ, but it makes you more vulnerable to other infections. Lots of questions might come up as you've watched this. Feel free to contact us if you have any questions, and we'll talk to you again soon. Have a great day.